Hello, Barrhaven United Church. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm so happy that I was invited to speak virtually with you guys today. I just want to start by saying a quick thank you to all the people who made it possible for me to be here today. Special shout outs to Heather, the social justice team, Reverend Carla, and everyone else who has helped in making this come true. So, yes, and thank you to the congregation also for being welcoming and allowing me to speak with you. So I'm really excited. So before I kind of get into my presentation, I wanted to first say a brief word on Black History Month. Now, as we all know, or most of us know, Black History Month is a month where we celebrate, remember, and learn about what Black people have done for the world, as well as all of the obstacles that they faced along the way. In my own experience, I found that Black History Month is often treated as a one-off event, in the sense that after the month is over, people tend to drop conversations surrounding Black history altogether until the next Black History Month pops up. And I guess my goal with speaking with you today is to shift our collective perspective and attitude towards Black History Month, to enlighten and to demonstrate how crucial it is to engage in conversations surrounding Black history and Black present, what it means to be a Black person today as a whole, and not just for our own personal knowledge, but also for a communal understanding and for society and for our church, as I'll come to describe how these conversations can help us in our everyday lives and really pave the way to a better future. So through talking about my own experiences as a Black woman growing up in Canada in a United Church, I hope to open your eyes to what could be a brighter future for our congregations. So me and my family immigrated from England to Canada when I was about 2 years old. So just for some context, me and my brother were born in England. My parents were born in England, and their parents had immigrated to England when they were quite young. So this is all to say that a lot of my family history lies in England, and because of that, it means that cultures and traditions I follow tend to be more European based. And I say this now because it's going to come into play later, but I just thought I'd point that out. Shortly after coming to Canada, my parents found North Brimley United Church, which is still my home church today. And I can proudly say that instantly we made great connections with the people there, and we felt a very strong bond to the place. That being said, me and my family were one of the only or very few Black families at our church, which was predominantly white. And while growing up, I didn't really think much of it. I wouldn't say that I didn't really notice it, but I didn't really see how it affected me until I was much older. And I'd love to say that this concept of being the only Black ... in any place was rare, but it wasn't. In my elementary school, that was predominantly South Asian people, I was also the only Black person a lot of the time, either in my grade or in my class. Usually it was, oh, Jonisha, the only Black girl in her grade. And I think at the time I was like, oh, that's such a cool thing. Like, I'm the only this. I felt unique, but like I was saying about being the only Black person or one of the only Black families in church, I think it had a deeper effect than I thought at that time, because so many of the spaces that I was interacting in, I was the only Black this or the only Black that. I didn't see myself represented in the places that I wanted to be or the places I was in. And it wasn't just the physical places that I was in or interacted with. It's the things I interacted with on a daily basis. So like watching TV or movies or reading and all those things, there wasn't a lot of Black representation there. there was very little. And the times when there was representation of Black people, it tended to not be in the greatest light. In a lot of shows that I watched, the Black person was just the comedic relief, but didn't actually really have a story to them, a life outside of the main character. And being a writer, and being really interested in writing and acting at that time, that had a huge effect on my perception of what it meant to be in that type of space. And it really just made me grow up thinking, oh, well, it seems like Black people don't really belong in these spaces. And that kind of made me feel resentment towards Black people, and ultimately myself from a very young age, where I just didn't want to be Black because at the time I didn't really see what the benefit of being Black was, or I didn't see Black people in a light that I wanted to be in. Though that started to change when I was in grade 5. One of the few Black teachers in my school had asked me to present at the Black History Month assembly. And at first I was a bit skeptical because, as I said before, I was kind of trying to distance myself as much from being Black as possible, just because I didn't really view it as a good thing. But my teacher convinced me to participate, so I did some reading and things like that. And I think that was the first time that I started to kind of see, outside of like media and outside of all that type of stuff, what it meant to be Black. And of course we talked about racism and all of that stuff, but we also talked about a celebration of Black people. And I think that was the first time I saw Black people in a different light to what was being presented to me. I didn't really get into delve deep into racism in Black history at that time, but it definitely was an eye-opener. So fast forward to high school, I went to an art school to study drama, which was really exciting because the school was very diverse. There are people from all over Ontario going to the school. So I was excited that I'd finally be surrounded by people who looked like me, as I'd come out in environments where that was rarely ever the case. Though, when I did get to school and I started making Black friends and things like that, I slowly realized that nothing had really, unfortunately, changed from when I was in elementary school. I was still viewed as an outcast. And it really baffled me. It really confused me. The Black people at my high school didn't view me as Black because I had grown up with many European traditions. So while a lot of the Black people I were friends with came from different types of Black cultures that I didn't really have any experience with, they kind of viewed me as, well, in their eyes, they called me whitewashed, which is a fancy way of saying that I was very European. I say fancy, but it wasn't a very nice way. But the thing was I just couldn't connect with them. I didn't eat the same foods that they did. I didn't speak the same way that they did. I didn't know the same things that they knew. And because of that, I couldn't connect. And I was made fun of for the entire 4 years that I was there, even by people who I called my friends. And it wasn't to any fault of their own. It's a lack of education, I knew. But it didn't help me in my journey of trying to figure out who I was and what it meant for me personally to be a Black person. And it was around this time that our church's youth group was kind of in tough waters. I had all these questions about race and other important things going on in the world. And more than anything, I kind of just wanted to go to my church and kind of discuss them with people the same age as me and my pastors and things like that, but they just weren't really prepared to have those conversations. At the time, the church was kind of more geared to entertaining the youth, trying to keep the youth in the church, but not actually really engaging them in their faith. And unfortunately, I really felt that I was dealing with these questions and I didn't really have anyone to talk about it with. Which made it really difficult during this time. And I kind of started to like fade away from the youth group as a whole, as it wasn't really serving me in my journey with God. So I started volunteering more with the children's ministry. And the craziest thing is that I oddly found the conversations there. And when I say children's ministry, I was working with like 4-year-olds. And I found these conversations I was having with them so engaging and so helpful because their minds are just so open. And the children's pastors really kind of took the lead of the children, and they really valued what they had to say. And that was just something I didn't really feel in my youth group at the time. So by the time that I graduated, I was stumped. It seemed like the places that I truly wanted to be in didn't accept me, and the places that I thought wouldn't did, in some ways. And I was just trying to figure out, I was trying to reevaluate what it meant to be Black. And more importantly, I needed to figure out as I got older, why I felt like I didn't belong anywhere, even at church. So after I graduated high school, I went to college. And unfortunately, I found that I was in the same boat that I was in elementary school. I, again, was the only Black person in my space, or one of the only Black people in my space. And it was around this time that I really started to lose hope that I'd ever figure out truly why I felt so disconnected from the world. And moreover, shortly after starting college, the world had turned upside down with the pandemic and the overwhelming uprise of social justice movements. And I guess during this time, my curiosity had turned to this like feverish anger towards what was happening in the world. After George Floyd had died, nobody could tell me that racism wasn't a thing, that everybody has equal chance, that it all just comes down to individuals and how they decide to run their lives, and that the world is fair, because it isn't. A lot of us saw that video and it wasn't fair and it didn't need to happen. So when I talk to people about this and share my anger, my frustration with people who just didn't really have that experience, I didn't find the support that I needed. People are either trying to debate me on things that were very clear, or trying to dispute the fact that they even happened, or at least happened the way that they said that they did. And I was frustrated, not necessarily because this is what these people were saying, but it was because I didn't have anything to come back with. I didn't have facts. I didn't do my research. I didn't know really much about anything to do with Black history in a wider sense of like what you learn in elementary school. So really, I just wanted to learn how to stop the injustice. But like many of us, when we go on this journey, we just don't really know where to start, which just makes us even more frustrated. But God had spoken to me through my previous children's pastor when she sent me a Facebook message saying that there was an opportunity at the United Church of Canada. And ever since I applied for that position, it has changed the course of my life completely. It was the opportunity that I got was to participate in the Young Black Scholars Program, which was a program designed for youth to research the lives of Black Canadians within United Churches. And as soon as I read through the application, I knew that I needed to be on that program. And it was all I could think about. So when I did my interview and the instructor called me to say that I was going to be one of the 6 people on the project, I was completely ecstatic. And let me tell you, I learned so much during that year being a part of that project. I delved deep into Black histories, and not just Black history as in like American Black history, but Canadian Black history. And I learned how Black Canadians had settled across Canada and how they're accepted into country, or, well, rather, how they weren't accepted into country. But more than anything, it opened my eyes to why I felt so disconnected from people, from my church, from places that I was in Canada. And it really all just came down to segregation, honestly. And not in the traditional way that I think a lot of us think. What I find many people don't know is that when Black people immigrated to Canada, because Canada was offering cheap land and they wanted to grow their number of citizens, many of them had settled in places like the prairies, places like Alberta, which is known to be, has a very deep history of racism there. And when the Black people arrived, many of them were religious and were looking to settle in churches in the areas that they were in. And many of these churches were predominantly white just because of the demographics of the area. And unfortunately, many of these churches were not very welcoming to the Black people who tried to visit their congregations or churches. And it didn't really take long for Black people to realize that they were not wanted. So they were forced to make their own churches. And I'd like to note that there were no laws really prohibiting Black people and white people from congregating in the same places. No one explicitly told them to leave, but everything to do with their behavior and demeanor made it very clear that they were not going to be accepted in these churches. So how has the past affected the present and how churches function today? Well, look around. A lot of the churches that we have today are predominantly white or predominantly Black or predominantly Asian, etc. There are few churches, really, in the grand scheme of things, that have diversity amongst their congregation. And it's not a coincidence that this is the way that our churches are structured. We chose as a society to live this way. And you might be thinking, well, what's the problem with that? Well, think about it. I know personally, I grew up in the church. If I wasn't at school, I was at church. If I wasn't sleeping, I was at church. A lot of my upbringing happened when I was at church. A lot of my memories are at church. And I think for a lot of us, we didn't just grow physically at church, but also mentally and spiritually. A lot of our morals and values and how to be human at its core was learned at church. Diversity in our church environments is crucial because when we feel like we're not represented in the places that we want to be, we feel like we don't belong. So when I didn't see myself represented in my church, I felt like I didn't belong in that church. And I'm not just saying that diverse churches are helpful for individuals, or just racialized people, or the minority group in the church. It's crucial to the whole congregation, regardless of who you are, regardless of what your background is. Because when you grow up, when you see people who are different to you, when you talk with people who are different to you, when you experience different cultures and traditions and things like that are different to your own, you gain a greater understanding of the world. Because when you look at the world, we are so diverse. We are so diverse. And if you grow up in a place where you only see yourself, then when you're confronted with someone who looks different to you, you won't necessarily know how to react. You might feel uncomfortable because you're like, oh, well, I don't really know much about that person or that group. And that's when we can start to develop stereotypes and biases. And that's where the root of racism lies, is when we have no education about people different to us, or we have a lot of miseducation about people who are different to us. So exposure to different people and cultures is crucial to the development of our congregations. As a Christian, I often think about what I would say if someone were to ask me how to describe God in one word. And I'd always say love, because he is. At his core, God is love. And more specifically, he is unconditional love. God loves everyone, and he reminds us to love everyone around us, regardless of their background, their ethnicity, their race, where they came from, etc. And I think if that's the case, then we need to foster environments and places of worship where everyone feels included and welcomed. 20 years ago, I was one of the only Black people at my church. Today, I am one of many. And let me tell you, it made a difference. I can't say I'm the only Black this anymore. And I have to tell you, it feels pretty darn amazing. Thank you so much for having me talk with you guys virtually today. I hope you all took something out of this. And I wish you all the best for the rest of your day, the rest of your life in general. And much love to you all. Bye.